I'm Irene, navigating life at 30 with a mix of web design and motherhood. Our family nucleus was simple: me, my husband Mike, and our 2-year-old sunshine, Danny. Our world was comfortably wrapped within the walls of our home, which stood as a testament to the life we built together. Mike worked for my dad's company, a job he was proud of, and I carved pixels into designs from my home studio. Our routine was pleasantly mundane until one evening at my parents' house, where family dinners were more than just meals. They were gatherings punctuated by discussions, laughter, and, sometimes, life-changing announcements. "So, I've been thinking," my dad began, his voice commanding the room's attention. He was a self-made man, a pillar of wisdom in business suits. "We're expanding the company. There's a new branch opening in the neighboring city, and I want Mike to take the lead on this." Mike, who had always admired my dad, perked up immediately. His eyes gleamed with a mix of excitement and determination. "Mr. Thompson, that's a fantastic opportunity. I'm all in." I felt a surge of pride and excitement. "That's wonderful news. We should all move there for the project duration. It's just a few months, and it'll be like a little adventure," I said, already envisioning our temporary life in a new city. Unexpectedly, Mike hesitated, casting a glance that didn't quite reach his usual confidence. "Actually, Irene, it might be better if you and Danny stay here. Moving could be a hassle for the little guy." His words hit me unexpectedly, like a cold splash of reality in our warm, cozy life. "But Mike, I thought we were in this together. And it's not like we have to uproot our lives. I can work from anywhere, and it would be a nice change for Danny." My dad nodded in agreement, his voice echoing my thoughts. "Mike, Irene has a point. The family should stick together in such times. And Irene's job gives her that flexibility." Mike seemed to be caught off guard, a nervous chuckle escaping him. "I was just joking. Of course, you both should come along." But that joke didn't sit right with me. It lingered in the air, an uninvited guest at our family dinner. The evening progressed with Dad and Mike diving into the logistics of the new business venture, but my mind was stuck on Mike's initial reaction. Why the hesitation? Why the reluctance? Later that night, after tucking Danny into bed, I found myself sitting across from Mike in our living room. The house was quiet, a stark contrast to the turmoil in my mind. "Mike, about dinner tonight," I started, my voice a blend of confusion and concern. "You really caught me off guard, suggesting that Danny and I shouldn't join you. Is there something on your mind?" He looked up from his phone, meeting my gaze for the first time since we sat down. "Irene, I didn't mean to upset you. It's just that setting up a new branch will be demanding. I thought it'd be easier for you to stay put, avoid the stress of moving." I leaned forward, searching his face for the familiar comfort. "But we've always faced challenges together. That's what we do. Why would this time be any different?" Mike sighed, putting his phone down. He leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "You're right, we do. And we will." I guess I was just overthinking it. It was a silly thought, nothing more. His words were meant to reassure, but they hung heavy in the room, a reminder that something in our equation had shifted, however slightly. Life has a funny way of throwing curveballs just when you think you've got it all figured out. Our little family was on the brink of a new adventure, or so I thought, until Danny, our 2-year-old bundle of joy, decided to rewrite our plans. It started with a mild fever, nothing too alarming at first, but it quickly escalated. I remember holding Danny in my arms, feeling his little body burning up as I dialed our family doctor. "Dr. Jacobs, Danny's fever isn't coming down." "I'm really worried," I said, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. After a thorough checkup, Dr. Jacobs' expression was serious. "Irene, I'm afraid it's more than just a common cold. Danny needs rest and cannot travel for a while. Moving to a new city is out of the question right now." The news hit me like a ton of bricks. I called Mike that evening, the weight of uncertainty heavy in my voice. Mike, Danny's sick. The doctor advised against traveling. We can't join you for now. On the other end, there was a pause before Mike responded. His voice was calm, almost too calm. Oh, is it serious? Well, that's okay, Irene. He needs to get better. We can manage. Something about his response didn't sit right with me. There was an undertone of relief, perhaps even contentment, that Danny and I wouldn't be joining him. It gnawed at me, that unsettling feeling of doubt. The weeks that followed were tough. Danny's illness turned out to be a stubborn infection that took its time healing. My days and nights merged into a blur of caregiving, leaving little room for anything else. Mike's calls became infrequent, and when he did call, his words felt rehearsed, lacking the warmth I was used to. Everything's okay here, Irene. Just busy with work. How's Danny? I'd update him, hoping for more engagement, but the conversations were brief and perfunctory. He's getting better, slowly. We miss you, Mike. Yeah, I miss you guys too, he'd reply, but it sounded hollow, as if he was saying it out of obligation rather than feeling. The distance was growing, not just in miles, but in our connection. It felt like Mike was slipping away, retreating into a world I wasn't part of. One evening, after a particularly short and unsatisfying call with Mike, I sat in the living room long after Danny had fallen asleep. The silence of the house echoed my thoughts. Was this what our life was going to be now? Mike distant and preoccupied, and me, alone, holding down the fort? Days turned into weeks, and the distance between Mike and me felt more than just miles apart. It was as if he was slowly drifting away, becoming a stranger. His calls, once filled with laughter and warmth, were now just formal check-ins. One evening, as I was putting Danny to bed, my phone buzzed. It was Mike. Hey, how's Danny doing? He asked, his voice lacking its usual tenderness. He's better, still recovering, I replied, hoping to stir some emotion in him. Work's crazy here, he said, sounding distracted. I sat down in the living room, the silence engulfing me. Mike, we barely talk these days. Is everything okay with you? You seem different. There was a pause on the line. Different? No, I'm just really busy, Irene. You know how it is starting up a new branch. I tried to keep the conversation going, to bridge the growing gap. I understand you're busy, but it feels like you're not just physically away. It's like I don't know you anymore. He let out a sigh. Irene, you're overthinking it. It's just stress, that's all. Once things settle down here, it'll be better. But his reassurances did little to ease my growing concerns. His words felt empty, devoid of the connection we once shared. Weeks passed, and Mike's brief return home did little to quell my fears. He was physically present, but emotionally distant. He spent most of his time either working on his laptop or engrossed in his phone. One night, I decided to confront him. Mike, we need to talk. You've been distant ever since you took this new job. Is there something you're not telling me? He looked up from his phone, his expression a mix of annoyance and surprise. Irene, why do you keep saying that? I'm right here. But you're not really. You're always on your phone or laptop. It's like you're here, but your mind is somewhere else, I said, my voice tinged with frustration. Mike closed his laptop with a sigh. Look, Irene, I've got a lot on my plate right now. The new branch, the pressures from your dad, it's a lot to handle. I'm just trying to do my best. I nodded, trying to understand. I get that, Mike, but we're a team, remember? If there's something bothering you, you can talk to me. He shook his head, a half smile on his face. There's nothing to talk about, Irene. I'm just busy, that's all. You're making a big deal out of nothing. But it didn't feel like nothing. It felt like a chasm was forming between us, one that I couldn't bridge, no matter how hard I tried. The day started routinely enough, with the familiar hum of my computer and the soft breathing of Danny during his nap. I was deep in thought, maneuvering through the complexities of a web design project, when a knock at the door jolted me back to reality. Opening it, I found myself face to face with a stranger, his eyes weary yet determined. "Can I help you?" I asked, curiosity mingling with a hint of apprehension. "Yes, you're Irene, Mike's wife, right?" "I'm David." His voice was steady but carried an undercurrent of nervousness. I nodded, still unsure where this was going. "That's me." "What is this about?" David took a deep breath, as if bracing himself. "I believe your husband, Mike, is having an affair with my wife." His words hit me like a ton of bricks. "That's impossible," I stammered, disbelief clouding my thoughts. "Mike wouldn't do that. There's got to be some mistake." "I thought the same at first," David admitted, reaching into his pocket. "But then I found this." He handed me his phone, his hand shaking slightly. The photos displayed on the screen were heart-wrenching. There was Mike, undeniably him, in a series of intimate moments with a woman I didn't recognize. They were laughing, embracing, their closeness leaving no room for doubt. I felt my world spin as I handed back the phone. "Why are you showing me this?" My voice cracked, barely a whisper under the weight of my crumbling reality. David's gaze was sympathetic yet firm. "Because you deserve to know the truth. And I think we should do something about it." A mixture of emotions surged through me, anger, betrayal, and an overwhelming sense of loss. "What do you mean, do something about it?" He leaned against the door frame, his posture suggesting a man who had nothing left to lose. "I have a plan. A way to confront them, to bring this out into the open. I can't just let this go, and I don't think you should either." My mind raced. Part of me wanted to shut the door and pretend this never happened, but another, stronger part knew I couldn't live with the uncertainty. "What kind of plan?" "We need more evidence, something undeniable. I propose we catch them together, in the act," David explained, his voice laced with a mix of pain and resolve. The idea was daunting, yet it resonated with the part of me that craved closure. "How would we do that?" "I know where and when they meet. If you're willing, we can confront them, together," he proposed, his eyes searching mine for a decision. The thought of facing Mike in such a scenario was terrifying, yet the need for the truth, for some semblance of control in the chaos, was overpowering. "Okay, I'm in. I need to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be." As David left, I closed the door and leaned against it, feeling the weight of the decision I had just made. The path ahead was fraught with pain and uncertainty, but I knew there was no turning back. The truth was out there, and I had to face it, for my sake and for Danny's. The reality of what David and I were about to do hit me as we sat in the dimly lit apartment next door to Mike's. We were there to unveil the truth, using the thin walls to our advantage. The apartment, ironically provided by my father's company for Mike, was now the stage for uncovering his betrayal. David was setting up a small recording device, his hands steady but his eyes betraying a storm of emotions. "Can't believe it's come to this," he muttered, more to himself than to me. I nodded, feeling a knot of anxiety in my stomach. "Neither can I. But we need to know, right?" As we waited, the silence between us was heavy, filled with unspoken fears and questions. Then, the sound of a door opening next door broke the stillness. My heart skipped a beat, and I saw David tense up. "That's them," he said, his voice barely a whisper. We moved closer to the wall, straining to hear. The voices were muffled at first, but then clearer. It was Mike, his laughter unmistakable, mingling with a woman's voice, his mistress. I clenched my fists, fighting back a surge of emotions. The intimacy in their voices was like a knife twisting in my heart. "Are you getting this?" David asked, his voice tight with anger. I nodded, holding the recorder close to the wall. Yes, it's all being recorded. The sounds from the other side of the wall continued, laughter, conversation, and then unmistakably more intimate noises. It was excruciating to sit there, hearing Mike betray our family so blatantly. But amid the heartache, there was a growing sense of resolve. We were gathering the evidence we needed, undeniable proof of their betrayal. After what felt like an eternity, the noises ceased, and a heavy silence fell over our makeshift surveillance spot. David and I exchanged a look, a mix of sorrow and determination in our eyes. "We have what we need," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Now we confront them." David nodded, his jaw set. "Let's do it now. No point waiting." As we stood up, I felt a strange sense of empowerment mixed with dread. The life I had known with Mike was over, and confronting him was the first step into a new, uncertain future. "We need to catch them off guard," David said as we moved toward the door. I agreed, clutching the recorder like a lifeline. "Let's go. It's time they faced the consequences." Stepping out of the apartment, the weight of the moment settled on my shoulders. We were about to face the people who had turned our lives upside down. The confrontation would be painful, but necessary. David and I stood in the dimly lit corridor outside Mike's apartment, our hearts racing with a mix of anxiety and determination. The plan was simple, but bold. David would pretend to be a courier, a ruse to ensure Mike would open the door. David knocked firmly, announcing loudly enough to be heard through the door, "Delivery." We heard footsteps approaching from inside. The door swung open, and there stood Mike, his face transitioning from annoyance to shock as his eyes landed on me. "Irene? What the hell are you doing here?" I took a deep breath, my voice surprisingly steady despite the turmoil inside. "We need to talk, Mike. Can I come in?" Behind Mike, the mistress, a young woman with a startled expression, stood frozen. Reluctantly, Mike stepped aside, allowing us entry. The room felt tense, charged with unspoken accusations and fear. Without mincing words, David confronted Mike. "We know about the affair, Mike. You can drop the act." Mike's reaction was a mix of defensiveness and scorn. This is nothing. She seduced me. I was just caught up." His mistress, now visibly shaken, retorted, "What? No, you were as much in this as I was." Ignoring her, Mike turned to me, trying to downplay the situation. "Irene, listen, this isn't what it looks like." I couldn't hold back any longer. "Not what it looks like?" "I heard everything, Mike. We have recordings." Mike glanced at the recording device in David's hand, his face turning pale. "Recordings? Irene, you've got to understand." "There's nothing to understand," I cut him off, my voice rising in anger. "You betrayed our family, Mike. You betrayed me and Danny." He started to say something but stopped, realizing the gravity of his situation. "Irene, please," Mike's voice trailed off as he fell to his knees, a pathetic figure of desperation. "Forgive me, I made a mistake. Please, don't tell your father about this." I looked down at him, feeling a mix of pity and revulsion. "You think I can just forgive and forget? I'm going to demand compensation for this betrayal. And yes, I will tell my father. He deserves to know the kind of man you really are." Mike's face crumpled in despair, but there was no going back. The trust we had was shattered beyond repair. David, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. "You're going to pay for this, Mike. Both of you." The mistress, now crying, looked completely overwhelmed. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." As we left the apartment, leaving Mike and his mistress to their own messy reality, I felt a strange sense of closure. It was painful and heart-wrenching, but necessary. The confrontation was over, and with it, a chapter of my life had ended. Stepping out into the brisk evening air, the weight of what had just transpired in Mike's apartment hung heavily over me. David and I walked in silence to a nearby park bench. The noise of the city around us felt distant, muffled by the shock and turmoil churning inside. David was the first to break the silence. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, Irene. But at least now you know the truth." I nodded, feeling numb. Yes, the truth. I paused, gathering my thoughts. "What are you going to do now?" He looked down, his hands clenched tightly. "I need to think. There's a lot to process. But one thing is clear, I can't stay with her after this." "I understand," I said softly. The reality of my own situation was beginning to sink in. I need to start planning for a life without Mike. For Danny's sake. David looked at me, empathy in his eyes. "If you need anything, any help, just let me know." I managed a weak smile. "Thank you, David. I appreciate it." We sat there for a while longer, lost in our own thoughts, before parting ways. As I walked back to my parents' house, where Danny was staying, the magnitude of the situation hit me. My marriage was over, and the life I had known was shattered. When I arrived, my parents immediately sensed something was wrong. "Irene, what happened? You look upset," my mom asked, concern etched on her face. I sighed, not sure where to begin. "Mom, Dad, I found out Mike has been having an affair." The room went silent. My dad's expression hardened. "Are you sure?" I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. "Yes, I'm sure. I heard them, and I have recordings." My mom reached out, taking my hand. "Oh, Irene, I'm so sorry. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to file for divorce," I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "I can't be with him after this. It's over." My dad, always the protector, spoke up. "He won't get away with this. I'll make sure of that. And you and Danny will always have a home here." I felt tears welling up in my eyes, grateful for their support. "Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you both." The final chapter of my marriage to Mike was written in a lawyer's office, amidst a sea of paperwork and legal jargon. The divorce process was grueling, but necessary. I fought hard, with my lawyer by my side, to ensure that Danny and I would have the financial security we needed. The court granted me alimony and compensation for Mike's betrayal, a small solace in the wake of our shattered life. Meanwhile, David, the man who had been thrust into my life by our shared misfortune, also finalized his divorce. His wife, once living a life of luxury, now faced a starkly different reality. She had to trade her affluent lifestyle for a job as a saleswoman in a retail store, a harsh consequence of her actions. As for Mike, the repercussions of his infidelity were far-reaching. My father, once a mentor and supporter, was ruthless in his response. He not only fired Mike from the company, but also made it clear that he would use his influence to prevent Mike from securing a position in any reputable firm. The man who once had a promising career now juggled two menial jobs, struggling to make ends meet. Life after the divorce was a journey of healing and rediscovery for me. I focused on raising Danny, ensuring that the upheaval in our lives didn't dim his bright, innocent spirit. Watching him grow, laugh, and explore the world was a balm to my bruised heart. My work as a web designer provided not just a financial lifeline, but also a welcome distraction. I threw myself into my projects, finding joy and fulfillment in creating and designing. It was a reminder that despite the chaos, I still had control over some aspects of my life. My parents were my rock during this time. They provided unwavering support, offering a safe haven for Danny and me. "You're stronger than you realize, Irene," my dad would often say. And as time passed, I began to believe him. In the quiet moments, often after I had put Danny to bed, I would reflect on the tumultuous journey. The pain of betrayal still lingered, but it was slowly being replaced by a newfound strength and independence. I had navigated through the darkest of times and emerged on the other side, not unscathed, but certainly stronger. As I closed the chapter on a painful part of my life, I opened a new one, filled with possibilities and the promise of a fresh start. My journey was not over, it was merely taking a new path, one that I was ready to travel with hope and determination.
The piercing scream ripped through my chest before I could stop it. There they were, tangled together like poisonous vines, my husband and my stepmother, locked in a sordid embrace on the kitchen counter. My eyes stung with unshed tears as Alex scrambled off Lana, his limp excuse for a shirt hanging open. "Bryn, this isn't—" He couldn't even finish his thought. Lana simply smirked, not an ounce of shame etched on her face as she smoothed her rumpled silk robe. "Hello, dear. Didn't expect you home so soon, did you?" Her saccharine tone sliced through me like shards of glass. You vile snake!" I hurled the words at her, chest heaving. "How could you, both of you?" Alex opened his mouth again, but I cut him off with a hand slicing through the air. "Save it. I don't want to hear another word from you." Pivoting on my heel, I stormed out of that wretched kitchen, slamming the front door behind me with enough force to rattle the windows. Hot tears streamed down my cheeks as I climbed into my car and peeled out of the driveway, desperate to put distance between me and that nightmare. I must have driven aimlessly for hours, the weight of their betrayal crushing my very soul. Lana, the woman who had stepped into my life as a stepmother when I was just 16, carrying on an affair with my own husband behind my back. And Alex, the one person I'd thought I could trust without question. How could I have been so blind? When I finally returned home well past midnight, the house was blissfully empty. I made a beeline for the den, scooping up the mail and papers scattered across the desk. That's when a plain white envelope caught my eye, addressed to me in my father's familiar scrawl. With trembling hands, I tore it open. Several pages fell out, covered in Dad's tight penmanship. My eyes immediately landed on the top line. "If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it." Dad's words jumped off the page, each line a punch to the gut. "I'm sorry I couldn't share this with you in person, but I've long had my suspicions about Lana. That woman is rotten to the core, manipulative and hell-bent on sinking her claws into our family's wealth by any means necessary." I sucked in a sharp breath, the pieces slowly falling into place. Dad had tried to warn me, but I'd been too blind to see Lana's true nature. Too consumed by the relief of having a mother figure after Mom's passing to look past the sugary facade. A noise from the hallway made me stiffen. Through the open doorway, I saw Lana saunter by in her silk robe, not a care in the world. Like she hadn't just decimated my life mere hours ago. "You lying snake!" The biting words burst from my lips before I could stop them. Lana whirled around, eyes widening in mock innocence. "Why, Bryn, whatever is the matter?" "Don't play dumb with me." I shook the letter at her. "Dad knew all about your twisted games. He tried to stop you from worming your way into this family's life." A flicker of anger flashed across her face before the syrupy mask slid back into place. "Your father was a paranoid old fool obsessed with fending off delusions. I pitied him, really." White-hot rage lanced through me, and I moved towards her, fists clenched, ready to unleash years of pent-up fury. But she only laughed, taking a step back with a shake of her head. "I'd think twice about that if I were you, dear. Your father's ramblings won't hold up in court against the truth." With that parting shot, she turned and slinked away, leaving me seething in her wake. Gripping the letter, I stalked into the living room and grabbed my cell phone, scrolling to find the number Dad had left. Mara Lewis, his attorney. The phone rang twice before a crisp voice answered. "Mara Lewis. Miss Lewis, it's Bryn Ellis. I need to meet with you as soon as possible regarding my father's estate." There was a pause. "Of course. I've been expecting your call. Shall we say 3 p.m. this afternoon at my office?" "I'll be there," I replied through gritted teeth. If Lana thought she could slither her way out of this, she was sorely mistaken. Dad had left me the key to exposing her twisted lies, and I wasn't about to let his final wishes go unanswered. She was going to pay for destroying my family, no matter what it took. By the time I ended the call, my path forward was clear. If Lana wanted truth and consequences, I would make damn sure that's exactly what she got. I stalked into Mara's office precisely at 3 p.m., my heels striking the marble floor with purpose. The impeccably dressed attorney rose from behind her desk, expression impassive. "Miss Ellis, thank you for coming in on such short notice." She waved a hand towards the plush leather chairs facing her desk. "Please have a seat." I sank into one of the chairs, back ramrod straight as I met her cool gaze. "I want to know everything. What evidence my father had against Lana, and what legal avenues are available to me." Mara's lips pressed into a thin line. "Very well." She reached into her desk drawer and retrieved a thick manila envelope. "These are the files your father left pertaining to his concerns over your stepmother." My fingers trembled slightly as I accepted the weighty bundle. Flipping it open, I scanned the pages. Reams of financial statements, phone records, even photos capturing Lana in compromising situations. As you can see, your father was quite thorough in documenting his findings. Mara allowed the faintest hint of admiration to color her tone. "However, much of this intelligence alone will be difficult to prosecute without corroborating evidence from other parties." I looked up sharply. "Are you saying Lana could still worm her way out of this?" "Potentially." Mara laced her fingers together atop the desk. "Which is why we must pursue a multi-pronged strategy. Legal proceedings, but also more personal venues of exposing the truth." A tiny smirk played across my lips as understanding dawned. "You mean going public and destroying her reputation beyond repair?" The barest hint of a nod. "Precisely. Draw her deceit into the light so utterly that no courtroom theatrics can obscure it." My gaze hardened to steel. "Do it. I want the whole book thrown at that conniving witch, financially, socially, all of it. I'll get you whatever information you need to leave her life in ashes." Mara's expression didn't flicker, but I could have sworn I saw a glint of approval in those steely eyes. "Very good, Miss Ellis. Then let's begin making preparations, shall we?" As I exited the office, I was acutely aware of the warpath stretching before me. Lana had waged her deception in the shadows, but by the time I was done, her wicked truth would be on display for the whole world to revile. The game was on. When I arrived home, Lana was lounging on the patio in that damned silk robe, sipping a glass of Chardonnay. She cast me a poisonous smile over the rim. "Why the grim look of determination, dear? Nothing unpleasant from the attorney I trust?" Digging my nails into my palms, I forced myself not to rise to the bait. "You'll see soon enough." With that, I brushed past her, heading inside to set my plans into motion. If the Viper thought she'd already won, she was sorely mistaken. I was just getting started. My first call was to Sam Jenkins, the one person I trusted wholeheartedly, my best friend since junior high. When she answered, I wasted no time launching into the sordid tale. "Oh my God, Bryn!" Even over the phone, her shock was palpable. "I can't believe Alex did that to you. And with your stepmother? Those depraved scum!" I laughed darkly. "Oh, just wait until you hear the rest. This goes so much deeper." By the time I finished recounting Dad's letter and Lana's damning past, Sam was fuming. "That evil, manipulative witch. We have to take her down, Bryn. She can't be allowed to get away with what she's done to your family." Exactly. I exhaled slowly, appreciating the sense of ally I now had at my side. "That's why I need your help. We're going to expose Lana for the venomous snake she is, then make sure she can never slither back into a position to hurt anyone else." There was steely determination in Sam's tone. "Just say the word, B. I'm in all the way, whatever it takes." As I disconnected the call, lightning crackled outside, a tempest brewing to match the storm I was about to unleash. The sun was setting on Lana Winter's web of lies. The next few weeks were a dizzying blur of covert meetings, strategizing with Sam and Mara to meticulously construct our multi-pronged attack. Lana didn't suspect a thing as she swanned around the house, periodically shooting me smug looks that made my blood boil. If only she knew what was coming. The first phase began with an anonymous online expose that Sam had expertly crafted, laying out the lurid details of Lana's tawdry affair with my husband in cold, hard facts. The story spread like wildfire, scandalous screenshots circulating rapidly across social media. I'll never forget the look of shock on Lana's face when she finally saw the viral firestorm erupting around her. "What is this?" She gestured wildly at her laptop, face flushed with rage. "Some kind of sick prank?" I strolled over, feigning nonchalance as I scanned the screen. "Oh my, someone certainly did dig up some unsavory details about your personal life." I clicked my tongue in mock sympathy. Not a good look, Lana. So much for keeping up that sugary facade. She rounded on me, eyes blazing like hellfire. You did this? I shrugged one shoulder lazily. Can't control the internet, can you? Allowing a small, satisfied smile to curve my lips, I turned and headed for the door. But hey, look on the bright side. At least now everyone knows the real you. Her screams and curses followed me down the hallway, bringing a wicked gratification. That was just the opening salvo. The next phase unfolded in a rapid succession of haymakers. Carefully tailored leaks to the right sources, exposing Lana's shady business dealings and financial improprieties. Records of offshore bank accounts, incriminating call recordings, whistleblowers emerging from the shadows of her past, painting a damning portrait of greed and exploitation. Wave after wave of evidence battered her so-called good name, and with each fresh public humiliation, I could see the strain spreading across Alex's features. Poor sap, he'd believed Lana's con job too, letting himself get tangled up in her lies. Well, live by deception, die by deception, as they say. As the hammer continued to drop, the elite country club where Lana had hobnobbed with high society revoked her membership, effective immediately. Friendships fractured within days, former allies distancing themselves from the maelstrom of scandal now swirling around her. I savored every ignominious moment from a carefully calculated distance, emerging again only when the final crushing blow was prepared to strike. It was the night of the charity gala held annually by Lana's once-respected charitable foundation, an evening where she'd always taken great pains to present her saintly public visage. Well, that mask would shatter into a million pieces tonight. Sam and I positioned ourselves across the street from the grand ballroom entrance, dressed to the nines and clutching crystal flutes of champagne. At precisely 8 p.m., a towering billboard blazed to life on the adjacent building, emblazoned with a single phrase in garish red font: Lane Winters, a legacy of lies, the full uncovered story. Beneath it, a QR code linked to a viral data dump, all of Dad's compiled evidence, the financial records and whistleblower testimonies presented in one thorough, utterly damning package for the world to consume. Within minutes, camera flashes were popping in a frenzied strobe across the red carpet as guests arrived. Those who saw the blistering billboard gaped in shock, muttering in phones held aloft, spreading the QR code like a contagion. Finally, Lana appeared in the center of the spectacle, eyes bulging in outrage and disbelief, as the realization of her annihilated reputation sank in. For one shining moment, her masquerade crumbled completely, exposing the true, blackened soul beneath. Another slow smile crept across my lips as I sipped my champagne and watched the Empress suffer a very public, very deserved execution. The first phase of my vengeance was complete. Time to turn my attention to the legal battlefield that awaited, and leave Lana to drown in the ocean of her own deceptions. The days following the charity gala exposé were a blissful reprieve as Lana went into full damage control mode. The house was mercifully quiet. She and Alex holed up separately with their lawyers, no doubt scrambling for some Hail Mary to counter the mountain of evidence we detonated. Good luck with that. Predictably, the first incoming volley was Lana summoning me to the den with a curt, "We need to talk." I strolled in to find her perched like a coiled viper on the chaise, eyes glinting with a mixture of wounded fury and smug calculation. Clearly she fancied herself holding some trump card. "Well, I see you've had your fun with your little internet theatrics." Her lips twisted in a mocking sneer. "But now the real game begins, pet. Unless you want to spend the rest of your days drowning in litigation, you'll back down immediately." I raised an eyebrow coolly. "Is that so? And what leverage could you possibly have, Lana?" Quick as a cobra's strike, she seized a folder from the side table and flung it at me. "See for yourself, dear." I crouched to scoop up the scattered contents, bank statements, property records, all laying out mine and Alex's joint assets in exacting detail. "What is this?" "Your Achilles' heel." A lupine smile curved her lips as the trap sprung shut. "Everything you've attempted so far is circumstantial at best, but with one simple lawsuit, your darling husband and I can ensure you're left with nothing but the clothes on your back." A cold shudder of realization trickled down my spine as her ploy crystallized. Of course. Attack my financial foundation in tandem with the smear campaign. bleed me dry through the legal system while simultaneously stripping me of credibility. Cunning little viper, I had to hand it to her. But if she thought unveiled threats would make me balk, she had sorely underestimated me. Straightening, I met her wolfish stare with an Arctic one of my own. You can posture and grandstand all you want, Lana. It won't make a damn bit of difference. I allowed a grim smile to tug the corner of my mouth. I have the receipts, as they say. The money trails, the testimony, all of it. You're going down in flames one way or another. Her serpentine eyes narrowed dangerously. We'll see about that, won't we? With that parting shot still ringing in the air between us, I turned and marched from the room, the first tremors of the legal earthquake we were about to endure shuddering beneath my feet. Mara was waiting in her office a short while later when I swept through the door and took a seat across from her desk. "Let's go on the offensive," were the first words out of my mouth. A flicker of understanding passed behind her eyes as she rifled through a stack of documents. Of course, we anticipated this maneuver when formulating strategy. She pushed a dossier across the desk towards me. Here are the grounds we'll pursue. Alienation of affection to form the basis of your divorce proceedings against Mr. Hammond. Given the clear evidence of infidelity and marital misconduct on his part, we have more than sufficient legal footing. My finger traced the printed words, relief loosening the knot that had formed in my chest. Divorce the cheating bastard, of course. Step 1. And for the vindictive viper? I scooped up the next section of the file detailing counts of fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion. Mara allowed the ghost of a grim smile. I took the liberty of reaching out to a few interested parties regarding your stepmother's activities. She slid a document across the desk. The IRS, SEC, you name it. By the time we're through, Lana Winter's tangled financial web will be laid bare, along with the full extent of her years-long con. Brilliant, I breathed, already envisioning her highfalutin lifestyle crumbling away to nothing but 4 drab prison walls. We moved swiftly and decisively, on all fronts. Mara's voice carried a lethal edge, a lioness scenting blood. Lana fancies herself a master manipulator, exploiting the system to her benefit. Well, now she'll learn the true power of that very system when wielded against her. A feral smile curved my lips as the first papers were drawn up, the battle fully joined. Game on, Lana. Don't bother hiring extra security. There's nowhere left for you to hide. The rules of engagement were set, and I wouldn't rest until I'd claimed victory through sheer overwhelming force. By the time this was over, that woman's life would be in ashes at my feet. The next several months were a dizzying cyclone of legal filings, deposition hearings, and mounting media frenzies as the twin proceedings against Lana and Alex accelerated. Mara was an indomitable force, calmly dismantling every underhanded tactic and angle of attack their lawyers attempted. I lost count of how many times I was grilled under oath, forced to recount in granular detail the undoing of my marriage. Each new dissolution hearing was akin to lancing a fresh wound, raw anger and humiliation burning in my throat. But I kept my composure, didn't dare let Lana or that sniveling weasel Alex see me flinch, no matter how many times Alex's lawyer tried to impugn my character or cast aspersions about my motives. Let them sling mud, I thought coldly. Won't change the truth staring them in the face. Speaking of which, Lana's legal battle was rapidly devolving into a masterclass of denial and misdirection. Her lawyers deployed every trick in the book to cast doubt on the mountain of incriminating evidence we'd amassed. Forged documents, they claimed, falsified testimony from paid actors, a coordinated campaign of lies by a bitter ex-wife desperately clinging to her material lifestyle. I had to smother laughter as I watched their clown show unfold in utter seriousness before the bench. Did Lana really think those third-rate theatrics would hold up against the towering edifice of proof we'd constructed? Mara shredded each absurd claim to bits with almost bored efficiency. Forensic records, rock-solid witness accounts, every damning data point laid out with the ruthless precision of a scalpel. And through it all, I took petty satisfaction in watching Lana's glaring weakness on the stand, as her artfully composed facade increasingly dissolved into flop sweat and desperate stammering. For once, the master manipulator had no script to fall back on, no lies to distort the corrosive truth burning her alive in that courtroom. The weeks ticked by with remorseless efficiency as the dual cases built to an inexorable climax. Lana's blustering faltered, her hired guns of lawyers slowly resigning themselves to the futility of their straits. At last, the day of reckoning dawned, a final trial date to decide both my divorce and the civil case against my shattered stepmother. I dressed simply but sharply, fixing my hair into a tight chignon as I steeled myself for the fight still to come. Alex and Lana were already seated at the defendant's table when I strode into the courtroom, heads bent in whispered conference with their haggard legal teams. They turned as one in my direction, twin expressions of loathing and fear. For the first time, I allowed myself a thin, predatory smile. They should be afraid of the all-consuming justice I was about to unleash. The proceedings passed in a whirlwind of procedural formalities, evidence rehashed, and accounts culminating to their inevitable apex. When the jury finally returned with their verdict, a deafening hush fell over the gallery. On the charge of felony embezzlement, how do you find? The forewoman stood, shoulders squared. We, the jury, find the defendant Lana Winters guilty. An electric shock seemed to judder through the courtroom. I could have sworn I heard the sharp crack of Lana's composure shattering in that instant as the words detonated in her ears. Tears began leaking from her eyes as the judge continued the stony pronouncement. Furthermore, the court finds sufficient grounds for civil tort based on alienation of affection in the matter of Bryn Ellis versus Alex Hammond. Divorce proceedings will commence immediately. A keening wail tore from Lana's throat as the full weight of loss crashed down upon her. Reputation, riches, the gilded facade of her life, all of it sledgehammered into rubble. And there, in the burning pyre of her ruination, the chains of bitterness that had shackled my soul for so long finally fell away in sublime release. Over. It was finally, utterly over. I took one last look at the shuddering, broken thing crumpled in the defendant's chair. The beast that had nearly destroyed me now caged at last. Not a shred of pity, mercy, or remorse remained between us. Only the karmic scales bearing down with implacable purgative force. As the bailiffs moved to take them away, Lana looked up at me with reddened, hateful eyes. But the iron curtain of my stare didn't waver until her disgrace finally dissolved behind the towering barricades of institutional gray. In the end, courage and truth had prevailed over calculation and venom. And although the road here had been brutal, my peace was finally restored. The rest would pass like a fever dream blasted away on the cleansing wind of justice served. I was free, reborn from the ashes of betrayal into someone tempered, someone stronger than I'd ever imagined. As I exited the courthouse and strode into the brilliant daylight, the specter of the past crumbling like ashes away, I inhaled the crisp air of my new life, untethered, inviolable, and fueled by deepest resilience. My vengeance was complete, but my true victory had only just begun. In the days and weeks following the court verdicts, an eerie silence descended upon my life. The seething crusade that had fueled my every waking breath abruptly faded, leaving a void I didn't quite know how to fill. Gone were the whispered strategizing sessions with Mara, the burning need to scour legal documents for any advantage over Lana's wicked machinations. Even taking Sam's calls, those pillars of support and levity as we dismantled my traitorous adversaries, started to feel like echoes of a life no longer mine. The cathartic release of justice served should have ushered in a tidal wave of closure, of inner peace regained. So why did I feel so unmoored? Adrift in the vacuum of my own victory? Perhaps it was the sudden quiet allowing darker reflections to encroach, looming specters of doubt creeping in from the shadows of my mind. What if I went too far in my crusade for vengeance? Sure, Lana and Alex had been snakes, betraying me in unforgivable ways, but the scorched earth demolition of their lives, the relentless and frankly gleeful unraveling of Lana's influence, resources, and very identity, had that crossed some moral event horizon? I tried to shove the thought aside, to revel in my hard-won vindication. But there was no denying the flashes of my own ruthlessness that kept surfacing, unbidden. The cold, unflinching determination to lay waste to anyone and anything standing in my path. Mara's words echoed with disquieting clarity. Lana fancies herself a master manipulator, exploiting the system to her benefit. Well, now she'll learn the true power of that very system when wielded against her. Had I simply become the reverse side of that very same coin? The doubts gnawed and festered, driving me late one night to the very place where this nightmare had begun. My stately home in the suburbs sat hauntingly silent under the pale moonlight. I let myself in with the spare key, wandering from room to empty room like a restless specter. So many memories echoed from every corner, both beautiful and terrible, all now cast in the cold, harsh light of irredeemable deceit. The kitchen, garish and obscene. The den, awash in Dad's mournful admonitions. The bedroom, a blighted sanctuary. By the time I reached the living room fireplace, huddled on the hearth in the darkness, bone-deep weariness threatened to overwhelm me. Who was I now in the ashes of this harrowing ordeal? Some hardened, embittered mercenary of my own vengeance, or a tenacious survivor determined to wrest back her dignity from the jaws of destruction? My gaze drifted over the mantel, lingering on the solitary framed photo, a happier time when the future seemed bright before the first hairline cracks appeared in the facade. I brushed the glass with my fingertips, tears stinging my eyes. How had it all gone so wrong? When did the downward spiral pick up that inexorable momentum towards mutually assured ruination? A soft sound made me stiffen, whirling to find the intruder, only to freeze as Sam padded into the pool of dim light. "Bryn?" She spoke softly, eyes filled with gentle concern. "I got your message. You said you needed." Her voice trailed off as I let the tightly wound mask slip, hot tears spilling in silent streams down my cheeks. It was too much, the weight of this whole shattered saga. I craved the absolution that had always seemed so clear before. But no platitudes came as Sam gathered me in her arms, simply holding on as the anguish of the last several months poured out in ragged sobs. For the first time since uncovering the betrayal, I allowed myself to shatter completely, burying my face in her shoulder as the foundations cracked open and the flood washed over. In that moment of abject brokenness, the hardened shell of victorious Bryn finally disintegrated, leaving only the raw, wounded soul desperate to find its way back towards the light. Perhaps this keening release would prove the catharsis I'd been seeking all along. The purging of toxic rage to make way for rebirth, rising up from the scorched earth left in vengeance's wake. Only time would tell. For now, I simply surrendered to the corrosive waves crashing over me, allowing the last remnants of my former life to dissolve into the ether. My road to healing stretched before me, arduous yet infinitely promising for what lay at its end, inner peace at last reclaimed. As Sam held vigil over my tear-streaked epiphany, the bitter taste of retribution gradually gave way to the promise of something far sweeter on the horizon, a true chance to begin anew. In the weeks following my cathartic breakdown at the old house, a profound shift took hold within me. It started small, rediscovering simple joys like morning coffee on the patio or evening walks around the neighborhood, mundane routines that had been crushed under the weight of trauma and obsession. Gradually, I felt the icy grip of bitterness and anger loosening its hold over my heart, replaced by a dawning sense of freedom and infinite possibility stretching out before me. When the final divorce paperwork arrived with a stark finality, I simply filed it away without fanfare. The severing of that wretched bond with Alex stirred none of the old vengeful urges, only a vaguely bittersweet feeling. Rather than dwell on the death of what was, all my energy channeled towards dreaming of what could be. It all culminated one bright spring morning over brunch with Sam as I announced my decision. "I'm selling the house." She paused, fork laden with Belgian waffle hovering midair. "You are?" "Whoa, that's huge, B." A small smile played over her lips as understanding blossomed. "Symbolic fresh start and all that?" I nodded, unable to contain my own widening grin. "Exactly. That place holds too many toxic memories, like a darkened void I keep getting inextricably pulled back into." I took a deep breath, savoring the rising sense of lightness in my chest. It's time to let go fully and move forward, you know? Sam reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "I'm proud of you for taking that leap," she said simply, eyes shining. We'd come such an unimaginably long way since those early, anguished days following the betrayal's discovery. From there, it was a whirlwind of action, hiring an elite realtor, sorting through our old life's worth of possessions, itemizing what to take and what to discard. With each box taped up, an item crossed off the list, I felt layers of my former self being gently shed and set aside. Finally, the big day arrived with the ringing of the doorbell, a couple straight off the real estate marketing brochure. Young, impeccably dressed, beaming at the prospect of their new dream home as I greeted them with the keys. I led them through the stately foyer towards the living area, though my strides gradually slowed as a clutch of bittersweet memories resurfaced. Flashes of holidays spent with Dad, laughter ringing through the space, recollections of smiling, promising days when this rambling manor had radiated warmth and joy, before the rot had set in and poisoned it all from within. The wife seemed to sense my pensive mood as she laid a gentle hand on my arm. "You've made so many wonderful memories here, I can tell." She gave a reassuring smile. "But I promise we'll fill this place with brand new joys of our own." I blinked, momentarily caught off guard by her perceptiveness, before nodding slowly. "I hope you do." With that, I pressed the keys into her palm and strode out onto the front path one final time. Pausing to drink in the elegant facade for the last time, now divested of its sordid significance. This chapter was officially closed, soon to be replaced by happier days in the making. My journey continued ever onward and upward. Over the next few months, the windfall from the profitable sale, combined with my meager inheritance and court settlement, allowed me to slowly rebuild my life through more positive, rewarding outlets. I rededicated myself to my marketing career with a vengeance, rising swiftly through the ranks and exploring new entrepreneurial opportunities. But even more fulfilling were the passion projects, like spearheading a nonprofit for women affected by abuse and financial dissolution. Each micro act of service, of selfless giving back, was like a healing balm applied against the wounds of my former trauma. Where anger and hatred had once festered, compassion and optimism now blossomed in their place. And when a potential new romantic connection gradually materialized, I felt unshakably self-assured in walking that path, buoyed by the rediscovered strength of my convictions. I was Bryn Ellis, bold survivor reborn. Master of my own destiny, free from the shackles of others' deceptions. The rising dawn of a new lifetime of possibilities stretched gloriously ahead in reverent silence. No further words were required for the shining truth that filled my soul on this day. I had confronted the darkest nights. I had waged the battles that defined me. And from the searing crucible of anguish, I emerged incandescent, inviolable, and infinitely wiser. My vengeance was complete. But more importantly, my true victory had only just begun.